Good evening and welcome to the Newshour Agenda. I'm Madhavdas G. Viewers, the Prime Minister has sent a resounding message to the world. India will crush terror and its roots completely. But what are the possible military options? Should India go in for the kill? Global experts weigh in on India's mission, Endgame Pakistan. While the entire country stands together and unites against terror, we'll also be debating about how some question and continue to question the motive of the terror attack, almost seemingly giving a clean sheet to Pakistan. Some even go on to call the attack scripted. Would you believe it? Is politics now undermining India's resolve? Is our second debate. Viewers, the nation lost 28 innocent lives in Pahalgam. The entire nation is seething in anger, and a nation of 1.4 billion people are demanding the strongest possible response, one that will completely put an end to cross-border terror. And the Prime Minister today made it clear, terrorism will not go unpunished. But what was equally important to notice today was the message that he sent to the entire world. It's not often that you get to hear the Prime Minister speak in English in the state of Bihar. But that in itself was a message that this is something about sending a statement to the entire world and all terror perpetrators that India will not spare the terrorists.
Today, from the soil of Bihar, I say to the whole world, India will identify, track and punish every terrorist and their backers. We will pursue them to the ends of the earth. India's spirit will never be broken by terrorism. Terrorism will not go unpunished. Every effort will be made to ensure that justice is done. The entire nation is firm in this resolve. Everyone who believes in humanity is with us. I thank the people of various countries and their leaders who have stood with us in these times.
But viewers, as India prepares to hit back, what are the possible options? Top sources have told Times Now that all possible options are being explored. After the biggest ever diplomatic strike, the focus is on military options as well. And we've learned that the Army Chief has briefed Defence Minister Rajnath Singh about the preparedness. Tactical options have also been discussed, and Indian Army has identified key terror launch pads and training camps across Pakistan-occupied Jammu and Kashmir. Here's what we've learned from the top sources as far as what's going to happen. 60 foreign terrorists from LET, JM and HM are active is what we've been told. We're also been told that 150 to 200 trained terrorists are there across these camps. The third aspect is that training camps are across POJK, which have now been identified. There's also the aspect of 17 local terrorists active in Jammu and Kashmir. Key terror launch pads have also been identified by all of our security forces, and some of the military options on the table also that are being discussed. Uri-style surgical strikes by commandos. There's also Balakot-style air strikes on launch pads that are being considered. The armed drone swarms to destroy camps is also something that's under active consideration. Targeted strikes by raw assets and SF snipers is what we've been told. Also, cyber ops to target ISI's digital infrastructure is something that's being considered. In fact, the Pahalgam attack was eerily similar to the Hamas playbook. In Pahalgam, the Lashkar-backed terrorists did the same as what was witnessed in Israel, strapping cameras to their chests, targeting tourists and firing in coordinated bursts. The parallels are chilling. Did Pakistan's terror handlers lift a page straight from Hamas's playbook? Let's take a look at the similarities here. One, of course, is the fact that body cam footage was recorded and it was, in fact, later used as well. Tourist targets, particularly crowded areas where our tourist spots were there. That's where the targets were there. They maximized civilian casualties as well is another aspect that is similar. There were multi-shooter assaults, coordinated sudden attacks using multiple gunmen that were in place. Also, there were rapid escape plans that had already been planned. The pre-planned exit and entry routes were particularly done to delay any kind of pursuit of these individuals. Join us on the other side for the debate on the same.
You're watching the News Hour at 10, debate number 1 on Times Now, Super Prime Time.
Joining us now is Ashok Sajanar, former diplomat, also with us. Ramachalani, strategic affairs expert. Major General G.D. Bakshi is a defense analyst. We have Daniel Kamen, former Israel ambassador to India, and Adrian Calamel is a fellow at the Arabian Peninsula Institute of Terrorism and Middle Eastern scholar. Let me begin with you first. Major General G.D. Bakshi, the similarities are absolutely chilling. While the Prime Minister has given a very clear message to not just India but the world today, speaking from Bihar, that India is going to go ahead and respond to these terrorists, not allow them or continue to chase them till the ends of the earth. The very fact that there's so much of similarity between what happened in Israel a little over a year ago and what we have looked at in Pahalgam just a few days back. General G.D. Bakshi.
Don't forget that just 2 months back, there was an Hamas delegation that had been brought into POJK, Pakistan-occupied Jammu and Kashmir, right? And they had been holding confabulations with Lashkar, with the ISI, with the Pakistan military. The pattern is as clear as daylight. About 6 days back, General Asim Munir, who is now heading for retirement, and most Pakistani generals just do not want to retire, right? They try and stage some problem on the India-Pakistan border, terrorist incident, to stay on, hang on to power, extend their tenures. That is precisely what General Asim Munir is up to. But he's gone a step too far. He went on a public platform with the Pakistani, overseas Pakistanis, and with the media in full stretch. He gave a civilizational war threat to India. He talked of Hindus and Muslims being two separate people with nothing in common, more or less inciting a strike against Hindus in particular. And a few days later, 4 days later, we have the Pahalgam strike, right? About 6 to 8 of these terrorists come down. That place is chock-a-block with tourists. They gun them down, and then they go a step further. They go around selectively, asking people their religion, their faith, and then they mercilessly gun down Hindus, right? In one particular incident, they, Manju Shri, I think that poor lady's husband's name was, they shot him, and when that desperate lady said, "Why don't you shoot me and my child? I've lost all that I had," he told her, "Go tell Modi, you can't have an affront and a dare as insulting as that."
Absolutely.
We have to hit back, and I'm very sure we will. We have opened up with a slew of options, and I think we've gone in for the economic option. So far, the Indus Water Treaty was absolutely sacrosanct. It wasn't touched in 65, 71, Kargil war, but now we have abrogated it. We have abrogated it. But that, I think,
we've kept it in abeyance. Absolutely. And in fact, the series of measures that we've announced, diplomatically speaking, of course, are definitely there. They're very significant. But what will be the military response is, of course, a very big question. But I just want to bring in Daniel Kamen on the point that you made about the similarities with Israel. And the very fact that you have groups there, coming in, which are responsible for terror there in the Middle East, Daniel Kamen, coming in here to Pakistan. Is it possible for them to actually be meeting with the JEM if they do not have the active support of the Pakistan military and the establishment there? Daniel.
Well, first of all, if I may, I'd like to convey our heartfelt condolences to India, the nation of India, and the affected victims and families of the victims and the wounded who will bear scars, unfortunately, for some time. This is really a terrible, terrible tragedy that you had to go through. I must say that as an ambassador, ex-ambassador to India, we have so many things in common. Unfortunately, one of them was the fight against terrorism. And yes, I heard the similarities that you were talking about. There are, of course, differences too. But the fact that there is a proxy war, the fact that terrorism is terrorism anywhere, I'm sure, I don't know so much, but I'm sure that there is a lot of cooperation between terrorist groups. And what I heard from my predecessor before of a delegation coming, and let me remind you that a few months ago, Mash'al from Hamas participated in a Zoom conference where he incited people in Kerala, if I'm not mistaken. So terrorism is there to stay, and we are there to fight it.
Absolutely. And in fact, Brahmachalini, if I can bring you in on this, the very fact that Israel, which was hit with terror very similarly, launched a series of countermeasures that we've seen over the past year and several months. India perhaps is today, with the kind of global response that's coming in, whether we're talking about the US, whether we're talking about EU, whether we're talking about Russia, so on and so forth, is India perhaps the best poised it has been in that sense to launch and send out a once and for all message to Pakistan, something that we've not seen before? Do you think the time is right for that?
Well, first, Israel was battling non-state actors, Hamas and Hezbollah. India faces a rogue state that is nuclear armed. So the military realities that India confronts are quite different than the military realities that Israel faces. But I think there are two or three things that we need to keep in mind. The first is that since 1948, India has been fighting Pakistan on Indian soil. Now the time has come to fight Pakistan on Pakistani soil. The second point is that a one-off operation like Balakot will not be sufficient to deter Pakistan. What India needs to do is to impose sustained costs on Pakistan, sustained costs. This requires a clear-headed approach, an approach that will employ all tools at India's disposal, not just military, but all kinds of tools, including non-military. When India conducted the Balakot airstrike, India went out of its way to say it had hit a terrorist camp and it had not touched any Pakistani military facility or bombed any Pakistani troop position. Today, if India is to deter Pakistan, it'll have to hit the puppet masters in Pakistan, not their surrogates. The terrorists are the surrogates of the military generals. India has to hit the Pakistani deep state. So let's be clear as to what India needs to do. And I think the steps that India has announced last night, those steps are probably only the first moves.
Right.
Those 5 steps announced last night do not impose tangible costs on Pakistan. In fact, those steps are largely symbolic, including keeping the Indus Waters Treaty in abeyance. India could have taken the legal exit from the Indus Waters Treaty, yet it chose to merely keep the treaty in abeyance, which suggests that India is merely giving a strategic warning to compel behavior change without burning diplomatic bridges just yet. But this is the paradox, that almost 80 years after Pakistan's creation, there are people in India at the highest level who still think they can change Pakistan's conduct. It is as if they have not understood the basic character of the Pakistani state. Even General Muniz call for civilizational war with India hasn't changed this kind of thinking in India. I
Right.
find that incredible that we
Absolutely.
still think that we can change Pakistan's behavior.
Well, certainly there have been many examples of every time India has tried to make peace overtures, how it's just been responded to with yet another terror attack from Pakistan's side. But let me bring in Adrian Calamel. Adrian, I want you to come in on this because, even from the perspective of the United States, we all remember how Madeleine Albright famously called Pakistan a global migraine. We all know how the person responsible for the 9/11 attacks, Osama, was found very close to the military town of Abbottabad. And very, very clearly, the role of Pakistan in fomenting terror globally has been very well known. And while the United States has officially come out and, very strongly condemned whatever India has been facing, yet we are seeing the United States also, having approved a package for Pakistan's F-16 fleet, for instance. Isn't this sending out mixed signals? And is the United States going to strongly stand with India, particularly under the Trump administration?
Oh, thank you for having me. This is obviously a very horrible time that India is going through, and the world needs to pay attention to. And to that question, it takes not just India, but it's going to take the United States, which has enormous leverage, to also inflict punishment on Pakistan. If you look at the United States and Trump's approach to the Islamic Republic of Iran, which is a maximum pressure campaign with kinetic action around the margins, I believe that's kind of what we should be looking at in vis-a-vis Pakistan, what should be done. The United States needs to help with putting an economic vice on Pakistan, because when we look at these deep states such as Pakistan that are ruled by in the Islamic Republic case by a theocracy, in this case by a pseudo army theocracy, whatever you want to call it, they all depend upon money, and the highest people at the top make the most money. That's why they stay in office. That's why they have offshore bank accounts. So you put them in an economic vice, and then you start hitting the terror training camps. And that needs to be the approach. The United States, the world needs to understand that, October 7th, what happened to Israel was not a one-off. It was a first in a line of these, and there is a gathering storm that the world needs to pay attention to. It looks similar to 92 to 96 in the Sudan, when Al-Qaeda basically was formed, molded out of clay by the Hezbollah and the IRGC. And now you've had, a few decades now, and they've regrouped. Okay, and they're in the process of regrouping. So these groups do coordinate. It's not just a coincidence that a Hamas spokesperson was there. This Khalid al-Khadoumi was in Kashmir at a global jihad conference. So the world needs to pay attention. The lines do connect, and they connect from Hamas to, if you look at this situation, it's Tehran, Kabul, Islamabad, and that's the terror network, and they're state sponsors of terror. The U.S. failed to recognize this for 20 years and paid the cost in Afghanistan. Now it's time to wake up.
Right. Now's the time to wake up. Ashok Sajjanar, just look at the response that's coming from Pakistan today. All of their measures, clearly showing how baffled they are. They clearly don't know, how they're going to respond, because the entire statement appears to be a copy-paste of what India has just done. It's exactly the same thing that they've just announced today. Even the word abeyance has been repeated.
Yes, thank you very much, Madhav. You are very right. I think they, frankly, do not know what has hit them. And that is why, I think without really going into any depth as to what their statements and what their actions are really going to, the impact that they are going to have, they have just sort of, issued them. In terms of, the fact that the Simla agreement is being held in abeyance. What does it mean? If you look at, this was a peace agreement between India and Pakistan, and also that you are not going to take your bilateral issues to any other global platform, but you're going to discuss it amongst yourselves. But Pakistan has been doing that, taking to all the global platforms. So I think they are obviously baffled, number one. Number two, Madhav, I think it needs to be recognized that what the Prime Minister said in Bihar, in Madhubani today, I think that will further put them in a corner, because the statement made by the Prime Minister was very, very strong. And I think it was, yesterday when we were discussing this, we said what the Defense Minister said, Mr. Rajnath Singh, that was strong, but I think today the Prime Minister has left no one in doubt. 2 points there. Number one, I think, what happened in Balakot, okay, at that time it was something new, so that was important. What happened in, Uri and Balakot, they were important. But this time it is going to be much more than that. It's going to be much greater than that, because you see, the Prime Minister has said in so many words, it is not only the perpetrators, it's not only the terrorists, but it is also those who are supporting them, those who are behind them. And who are the ones who are supporting them? It is the deep state of Pakistan. It is the army. It is the ISI. So I think the next attack, as and when the action that comes from India on Pakistan, it has to be on certain elements of the Pakistan army.
Absolutely.
The second point, Madhav, if you permit just one moment, is, you were talking about that the whole world is with India. You see, the whole world was with India maybe even in a more proactive way in 2008 after 26/11, because there it was 167 people who had been killed. There were Americans, there were Jews who had been killed. So the world was with India at that time. India decided for its own reasons not to take action. Right now also the world is with India. And I think Mr. Trump is a much more proactive and a stronger proponent of counter-terrorism and anti-terrorism than any of the presidents before him. So I think we need to take this
absolutely. And in fact, let me bring in General G.D. Bakshi. Your hand was going up, so I saw that. The exact quote of the Prime Minister today, and perhaps the most hard-hitting, was that अब आतंकियों की बची कुची जमीन को भी मिट्टी में मिलाने का समय आ गया. In other words, whatever land that the terrorists have, we have to bring it down to dust. It's the strongest possible threat that has come in, and even the kind of messaging that happened, General G.D. Bakshi, was in English, for not just consumption here in India or in Pakistan, but for the whole world.
Absolutely, it was meant for a global audience. That is why it was in English, right? What I would like to point out is that in 2016, the surgical strike, 150 odd para-commandos, special forces going about 3 to 4 kilometers deep and killing about 40 terrorists in the launch pads was a message, was a signaling. Balakot, one-off airstrike about 80 kilometers inside Pakistan was a signaling, a messaging. It was not for deterrence, right? This time, it has to be for deterrence. You have to deter Pakistan, raise costs and consequences, deter them from such actions in the future, and for that the punishment that you inflict has got to be salutary. That will not happen with one airstrike or two airstrikes. You will have you will have to get onto the escalation ladder and take it as far as Pakistan tries uncle, and at the same time keep looking over your shoulder for the nuclear threshold. The nuclear threshold is overhyped and oversold. We fought the Kargil war for 3 months. We didn't see a single nuke landing on New Delhi, right? The Russia-Ukraine war has gone on for 3 years plus. We haven't seen any nukes on Kyiv or anywhere else, even though Russia has 1,650 of them, and very major and big ones. So a lot of this is, excuses for inaction, which were doled out at the time of 26/11. Excuses for inaction and excuses because the geopolitical environment then, the Americans were fighting in Afghanistan. They needed Pakistan for logistical support. They weren't very keen for Pakistan to switch its forces to the Eastern Front. And therefore, they also dissuaded us.
Right.
But now, as Ambassador Sajanar said very rightly, Donald Trump is going to be far more supportive.
Okay.
And whether people are supportive or not, I think we have to do what Israel did.
That's the big question indeed. And Brahmachalani, I want you to come in on this because, today the response coming in from Shehbaz Sharif in response to, the disruption of water supply, so on and so forth, he says that this would be considered an act of war. This kind of threat coming in from Pakistan, when it has perpetrated such a massive terror attack, should India even be considering this? Because, here the mood in India is quite different. As General G.D. Bakshu was saying, we should perhaps be prepared for some kind of an extended conflict.
It was an act of extraordinary generosity on India's part to sign the Indus Waters Treaty, which reserved more than 80% of the shared waters for downstream Pakistan. This treaty remains the world's most generous water-sharing treaty. It's also a monument to India's folly that India, for so many years, 65 years, has retained this treaty, even though its original intent of promoting subcontinental peace went up in smoke within 5 years of its conclusion when Pakistan, emboldened by the Indus Treaty, launched a full-scale war to grab Jammu and Kashmir from India in 1965. Pakistan, over the last 65 years, has repaid India's water generosity, not with gratitude, but with grenades and guns. Treaties are built not on paper, but on trust. And trust is precisely what Pakistan has shattered time and again through its unwavering commitment to cross-border terrorism. For India, this is a watershed moment in more ways than one. It's a challenge for India.
Absolutely.
It's a challenge for India and a challenge for Modi, a challenge to Modi's leadership to demonstrate that he's willing to deal with the menace from Pakistan in a manner.
It's a challenge for the entire nation, I would say. But Adrian Calabel, I want you to come in on this. There are those who say, and given the kind of open, talk we've just had about how JEM, LET, HF, etc. came together to rally their support for Hamas, all of this is well documented. This happened in February. We know how Hamas spokespersons have come in. What's the chance or what's the possibility of Pakistan once again making it to the FATF grey list, given all that we are seeing right before us?
Making it to, I'm sorry?
The FATF grey list, the Financial Action Task Force grey list.
They really should be. It's very, I found it very, I don't want to say odd. It was very disturbing that 24 hours before this attack, I was working with a journalist in Pakistan to talk about, I was giving quotes about them and the Pakistani government and Hamas opening up an embassy inside Pakistan. And the Pakistan government was going to approve to it. And I tried to explain how that was a bad idea. Clearly, they cater to terrorist organizations that are blacklisted. They're already bringing in a terror organization to set up an embassy that's on the foreign terrorist organization list as one of the most vicious groups in the world. And they're ready to bring them in and give them an embassy. If anybody knows about how the Islamic Republic and its proxies use embassies, they're basically planning centers, spy centers, coordination centers. It's a terror node. So yeah, absolutely. They need to be put onto some, as I said, the maximum pressure campaign hits the Islamic Republic of Iran financially. You need to do the same to Pakistan. You need to hit them kinetically and financially.
Absolutely. Ashok Sajana, in the midst of all this, India has today briefed G20 ambassadors. There's several of those envoys who've gone to South Bloc, and India clearly would have sent out the message of what it really believes. Anything that you can share for us in terms of what India would have communicated? And it's very important when we're talking about the global support to keep the world, of course, informed. Of course, domestically, there's been an all-party meeting, but internationally as well, there is certainly an effort at communication and putting out India's point of view.
No, absolutely. Madhav, I'm, in this present position, I'm not privy to anything that would have been said. I'm sure as far as the official spokesperson is concerned, in due course, he's going to come out and he's going to sort of, share some of the details with us. But, 2 points here. Number one, I agree with what General Bakshi said, that we need to do what we have to do, irrespective what anyone around thinks or says. That having been said, I think the global support in this is very important because, if you have the global support, particularly of the major countries, then you can rest assured that, anything that you do, it will, there'll not be any critical voices like what India did in September 2016, post-Uri, surgical strikes, Pulwama, Balakot. I think the whole world was with India. And even, Pakistan tries to always raise this issue of Kashmir in global fora, international fora, UNGA, etc. No one takes any note of it. So I think it's important to keep the global community also briefed. And, as you mentioned, very correctly, Prime Minister Modi also went from Hindi to English for a few sentences because he didn't want to be sort of, things to be lost in translation. And he sent out this message very, very clearly that the terrorists, wherever they are, their backers, wherever they are on this earth, we are going to pursue them and we are going to take care of them. So I think this is the messaging, whatever information that India has in terms of Pakistan's involvement. We have come out with 3 of these sketches of the terrorists who were there and how they came from Pakistan. We have been able to, as far as their digital footprint is concerned, we were able to trace that to Muzaffarabad and to Karachi. So I think all this sort of information would have been shared with the envoys so that, they can sensitize and they can brief their own capitals, their own headquarters, so that we continue to, get their support. Because after this, there have been so many
In fact, India's strategy is very clear there. Ashok Sajanhar, I'd like to thank you as well as Brahma Chalani, Major General G.D. Bakshi, Daniel Carman and Adrian Calmel for joining us. And India's response will be decisive. Whatever it is, whenever it is, it will be at a time and place of India's choosing. Thank you so much, gentlemen, for joining us this evening.